Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 28th of December, September 2022. Let's get moving. Catherine, apologies for absence.
We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Allaway and Councillor Rise. Councillor Bates is substituting for Councillor Allaway and Councillor Tapper is substituting for Councillor Rise. And Councillor Chapman has joined us online.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments, any amendments? I see none. Someone to propose it and to second it. Well, Councillor White and Councillor Black, secondly. Thank you. I'll sign it later. Yeah. You want me to do it now? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Looks like none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Deitch.
Yeah, thank you. As there's going to be some discussion tonight about economic development, I should declare that I have a pecuniary interest with the Square Camberley. I provide professional services for the Square, and the same for Collectively Camberley.
Thank you very much. Can we note that, please? Thank you. Any other? No, no other interest. Thank you. Right. Before we move on to item number 4, item number 4, which is complaints monitoring report. I've already pre-warned the monitoring officer and the CEO that I would be raising a question on the market movement of interest rate and on the yield, as to where the council is with regarding our finances and the impact of that. If either Section 151 officer can make a statement or make your comment, that'll be very useful for this committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It wouldn't be right for me to comment on government policy around the actual fiscal event that occurred at the end of the month. But there is going to be, obviously, starting to see impacts on the markets, and that's something that I cannot ignore when looking around where the council is going to be. We have been aware that interest rates are rising and going to be rising for some time, and therefore we have taken plans already to mitigate the impact of rising rates on there. There was, of course, the Phoenix loans, which were arranged and agreed before I came, so I won't claim all the credit for those, but I didn't wish to challenge them or unwind those various loans that we had on those sort of things there. And we do have a lot more of our debt now with the Public Works Loan Board as well at fixed rates. What I wouldn't be doing at any point soon is fixing any more longer term debt, because the market is now starting to rise and rise rapidly, but it would be wrong to tie the council in for 50 years or so on rates that are probably starting to see their peak in the next few months. So what we were looking to do with some of our shorter term debt is agree maturity when they mature to roll over where we can, and we've already done a couple of forward deals for December maturities at rates that are now seem to be very advantageous, sitting below the rates coming through. What we would do again, as some of our short-term debt matures, is look to reduce our core investment balances that we hold as a council. We held money to invest. Some of its core balances, and the rest of it is working capital that allows us to flex during the day-to-day running of that council. So I will look and see what the opportunities are, and there are opportunities to convert some of our investment money into debt repayment, and what we have in turn is internal borrowing to meet our capital financing requirement. and that is the best I can do. Now, there's going to be an impact, obviously, of inflation on our budgets going forward. We're already starting to identify those with the service managers as part of the quarterly budget monitoring report in, and at that point in time, we will record in there. Fortunately, or unfortunately, a lot of our contracts are set with inflationary uplifts in them, and that will be an annual uplift. So when we start building the budget for next year, there is going to be budget pressures, I can't deny it, around those inflationary uplifts, and it's down to them. And what I'm already starting to do is talk or request that the service managers who manage these contracts start discussing what opportunities within the contract exists for making other alternative savings to outweigh those pressures. Now, that may, of course, mean some reduction in the level of service, but that would then become a councillor decision when we set the budgets, what's acceptable. So it is a challenging time for the council. It's a time that is going to put pressure on our budgets. We are not alone. We are probably more fortunate than, I would say, 90% of the other councils out there, in that we have a strong reserve balances through money put aside previously that would allow us to weather this storm. And I have concerns about setting the balanced budget, but I don't have concerns about the financial viability of the council.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Watson. I don't think there should be any question at this stage. I think I would suggest that Mr. Watson actually goes away, does his work, and then reports as per usual through the exec. And when it comes to exec and to the full council, we can raise more questions. And I'm sure it'll come back to the scrutiny committee once it's been through the exec. Thank you very much indeed. Right, moving on. Complaints and monitoring annual report.
Okay, Chairman, as you rightly say, this is the report, the complaints monitoring report for the year 21-22. The report details the number of formal complaints received by the council during that period, and during the period there were 26 of these compared with 28 in the previous year, so there's been a small improvement there. To put this into perspective, there were a total of 70,000 conversations had between borough staff and residents by telephone, and another 12,000 by way of emails or web. So the number of formal complaints is very small relative to the traffic that's going on. An analysis of the formal complaints by department is included in the report, and also there's a comparison between our performance and other local authorities. Following the restructure of directorates, some services have moved, which means the year-by-year comparisons of departments are not easy. For example, planning used to be part of regulatory, and now they're within the Finance and Customer Service Directorate. But hopefully you can see the trends which are there. Of the 26 formal complaints made during the year, all were acknowledged within 2 days. 23 were resolved within 10 days, and the 3 final customers were made aware of the reasons for that delay. So I think a very good performance there by the team concerned. A detailed analysis of the complaints received revealed that of the 23 of the 26 were in fact not justified at all. They were people misunderstanding the situation or whatever. Okay, only 1 was partly justified and only 2 were really justified as a complaint, which given the scale of our operation, I think you'll agree is very small. Of the 12 that were eventually referred to the local government ombudsman, none were upheld, which is a very nice performance. So I'm joined tonight by Bob and Lynn Smith, who can answer any detailed questions that people have got, but there's a lot of detail in the report, which I won't bother to go through now. Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any questions? Councillor Wheeler.
Thanks very much. I just would like a little bit of clarification, because although it looks jolly rosy that we managed to deal with everything very quickly and very effectively. There is a large chart in this paper which talks about complaints and inquiries received, and it's very difficult to have a breakdown between which is a complaint and which is an inquiry. And my very poor arithmetic is looking at about a 22% increase in complaints stroke inquiries received this year in comparison to last year. And then if we look down at decisions made, and the comparison chart there, it would look as though actually the complaints and inquiries are all some form of complaint, as opposed to a where do I get my bins emptied type of thing. So I just wonder if it's possible, please, to have some clarification on that. And the other thing that I would be grateful if we could have some clarification on is in 1.15, there we talk about the training of our staff in how to deal with opportunities to answer questions rather than to deal with complaints. So about their training, and I just wondered what percentage of our staff have actually completed that training. I'm assuming by now it's 100%. But actually looking at where it is at the moment, it would look as though we had an awful lot more complaints and inquiries, and possibly not quite as rosy as the picture that you just presented.
Councillor Perry, whom would you like the question?
I'd like to pass to Smith in a moment to go into some of the detail, but I'd just like to make the overall comment that the improvement of customer service levels, which is basically what you're talking about, is part of our objective for the department, and we're looking at starting by analysing more carefully all the comments that come in, so we can actually then target action to show an improvement. So that's happening as a general everyday matter of course at the moment. But in answer to some of the more detailed questions, I'd like to ask Mrs. Smith if she can fill in the gaps for me.
Just before Mrs. Smith comes in, Chair, would it be possible, please, to have a breakdown of the complaints and inquiries, to have some analysis of which is a complaint and which is an inquiry, please? Maybe that could be circulated to this committee.
Okay. Are you happy for me to join you? Good evening, everybody. I'm going to try and remember all the questions, councillors. I will do my best. The councillor referenced the screenshot I did, complaints and inquiries. It would be fair to say that I did see, in terms of Surrey Heath, an increase in complaints coming through during 21. From what my analysis showed, that was because 2020 was a little quieter, and that may be true for what the Ombudsman was managing. But these numbers are directly from the Ombudsman, and I cannot answer honestly in how they interpret an inquiry and a complaint. This is very much their data from their website, which I thought would be of interest to you. What I can tell you in terms of Surrey Heath, you referenced a positive picture, and it really is. When I did a full analysis of the complaints coming through to us, I saw a change in trend. At one point, I would have been able to say to you that the majority of our complaints are about perhaps poor response times. I think I referenced that the last time I joined you at this meeting. Or the majority of our complaints were about not being kept informed. So customers had their perhaps a planning application or a request for a disabled facilities grant. They had it managed, but they weren't kept informed throughout the process, and that caused a lot of frustration. What I've given Councillor Perry was a detailed analysis of each and every one of the complaints he referenced. And what it showed is that they were all completely different. So that whole trend of our not getting back to customers, that whole trend of our not keeping people informed, something which we were very poor at, has been completely turned around. And so not only are the numbers less, but the reasons sitting behind the complaints are literally the 23 out of the 26 people either not agreeing with the decision that was made, which I can understand, but it wasn't about poor customer service. And that, I think, is something very positive to report back to this committee. The breakdown you requested of what is an inquiry and what is a complaint, again, I can't give you that from the Ombudsman's perspective. I can tell you that that's something that is funneled through the expertise of the contact centre, because people will often say, I'm not happy, or I want to complain. And actually what they really want is a service provided. So that is difficult for me to give you a breakdown on. I could give you a breakdown for stage 1 complaints, which would consider very informal, but again, they would be different to an inquiry. It's simply the expertise of my team when we determine when somebody actually has a complaint rather than a need for a service. But I'm very happy to provide the stage 1 data for the same time period. I've got that in front of me, I'm looking at it. But again, in terms of volume, it shows a downward trend. I think there was a third one, and I do apologise because I can't remember what that was.
It was about training, how many people we have trained.
Thank you, Chair. I know that the training has been discussed with me, and I've had some input to what I think that might be, but the actual numbers and the volumes of how people have gone through that, I don't have that data. That sits within organisational and development team. I would have to refer to them, which I'm happy to do on your behalf.
Thank you very much. I mean, I'm interested in it as well, so it would be a good idea to actually get that information to this committee.
Yes,
because if you're going to, sorry, if they are going to actually, if you say something, you have to provide the data. We can't say they have been trained. We need to understand where it goes. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, just taking the opportunity to look back at the 2018-2019 figures. The average upheld rate for us this time round is 51%. 2018-2019, it was 45%. So actually, it's a slightly less positive outcome, although the numbers of complaints have definitely gone down.
Other than that, you are happy with our other answers, yeah? Thank you. Councillor Galliford.
Thank you. I'm aware of a complaint made by one of my residents, and I think it escalated in part because an officer left who had some quite useful information, and that information was lost. So I'm just wondering whether other procedures as to handovers, etc., have been put in place so that this doesn't happen again, because it very sadly put the council in slightly bad light at the time, and I really feel that it wouldn't have escalated as much as it eventually did had that information been available to other officers.
I don't know who wants to take that one on.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Galliford. I think members will be aware that we have had higher levels of turnover this year than we have had in recent years. And one of the consequences is certainly that staff take away a significant amount of knowledge and expertise. Sometimes those staff leave because they're reaching retirement age. We generally have a workforce that's closer to retirement age than other sectors. And in some occasions, we lose people to jobs elsewhere in local government. We are putting a lot of effort into making sure that the systems and procedures that we have document the information that's necessary that enables a smooth handover to happen. I think one of the challenges that we faced is that where possible, we try and have a handover process with hopefully the new person starting with the other person still there. Two things have got in our way. One is that staff this year have been holding high levels of annual leave because of the annual leave that they've built up, particularly during the COVID time, that they're progressively using up. But the second issue is that we've found it quite difficult in many cases to recruit to those vacant posts. And therefore, the larger the gap, the larger the time gap between somebody leaving and somebody starting, the more difficult that's been. But there is definitely a concerted effort to make sure that more is documented, more of their knowledge and skill is captured so that when the new person starts, there is a much more straightforward handover. But I have to admit that we haven't got it right on every occasion this year, and it remains a significant risk.
Councillor Perry.
Yes, I'd just like to add to that that part of the ongoing process I mentioned about improving customer service will involve the creation of a number of question and answer and frequently asked question sheets that are produced, held by the contact centre and by everybody really. So it's there for newcomers to look at. If this question comes up, you've got the answers, and that can be added to over the years. And so it'll be much easier to do it. As the Chief Exec said, we've lost a lot of people with a lot of knowledge, and their customers are being answered by people who maybe don't even live in the area. And it's not surprising we've had a few comments about that. But we are addressing that issue, and hopefully it will improve the situation as we go on.
Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chair. One of the comments which has just been made, which was put forward as a suggested reason, was high levels of annual leave. And I was quite surprised to hear that, because certainly my old council, when I used to work at it, and I thought the same in Surrey Heath, was that you could only tie over a maximum of 5 days. And the reason for that was firstly to ensure that the staff did take their holidays during the period. I know we had a pandemic, but nonetheless, it's quite right that people have the opportunity of taking leave. But also to ensure we didn't have exactly the problem that we've just outlined, namely members of staff may be taking extended periods, with the exception of agreed sabbaticals or extended holidays or that sort of thing. So can I just clarify if that policy is still in place? Do we still have a maximum of 5 days annual leave? Or what is the current arrangement in terms of accrued leave?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Bates. So the Council's policy in relation to annual leave is that staff, under normal circumstances, can carry forward up to 5 days between one financial year and another. The issue arose before I started, where because it was very difficult for staff to take leave during lockdown, there was an agreement they could carry forward a slightly larger amount, but that clock would be reset at the end of this financial year. So from March, at the end of this financial year, the maximum amount that staff can carry forward will be back to 5 days.
If we want to come back, Councillor Bates.
Just quickly, I wasn't aware that that had been agreed. Who agreed that? Was that done by us? Or who actually did that?
I think I wasn't here when it was initially agreed, but I think it was an operational decision taken in consultation with HR, but I wasn't here.
Can I butt in here? I mean, even if it's an operational decision, I think now that we've got an entire new management structure here, that it's actually referred accordingly to the right committees, right working groups, and it gets signed off. Because if decisions like this are made, it has an impact on the council. Okay. I want to add something to the question raised by Councillor Galliford. Because if a person who is leaving the council, be it the new management or the old management, there must be emails, there must be documents, which has to be around somewhere. So if you take a case, in this case, I roughly think I understand with these particular cases, there must be tons of documents somewhere. So even a new officer should be able to pick this up. And as a councillor, Councillor Galliford shouldn't be left in a position to try and defend an indefensible position of saying the officer has left and we have no idea, and we have no track of these items. So I would strongly suggest that Councillor Galliford, you speak to the CEO or to Mr. Watson to see whether you can find a bit more on this. Thank you.
And Chairman, just to follow up, so of course staff have a lot of emails, but also we have some really good, what we call business systems. They're case management systems. We have a case management system in planning. We have a case management system in most of our high volume frontline services. And those systems capture action taken by officers, correspondence and responses from customers and residents. And that's the primary route that we go to. But that's not the same as the knowledge and built-up skill that somebody has over a number of years. And that's the bit I think we're trying to put a greater focus on to support the transition between people who leave and people who start. And that work is in hand, but it's underpinned by those core business systems that do the job that you've just described.
Thank you. Councillor Gelfand, do you want to come back on it? Are you happy with it?
I don't at this point wish to give any further details, and I believe the CEO probably, as he's nodding, probably knows the case that I'm talking about anyway, and we have mentioned it in meetings before. So for the time being, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Uh, Economic Development Transformation.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening to you all. You have before you the paper outlining what has been going on within the portfolio of economic development transformation in the last year. As I know you've already read it, I don't intend to go through the whole paper, but I wanted to pick up a few points. This will give you more time to ask questions at the end. So, asset management, the asset management and property management services contract for the Square is currently held by Montague Evans. This is being rendered by SHBC via a public procurement service. This was launched on the 26th of August, and successful bidders should be in post by spring 2023. The bidding process is now closed, and we are starting to evaluate the evaluation process for the 5 tenders which we've received. Since August, Surrey Heath community providers have been running their NHS vaccination programme in Obelisk Way. This is the rollout of the autumn COVID booster campaign, currently running at about 2,300 per week, but likely to increase in the coming weeks due to an increase in supply. Car parking, since the parking review was approved in February 2022, as you can see from the stats, we are up against the review in most areas. There have been a few car parks that are down in car park fees, but some of these car parks are up in season tickets in most cases. Generally, the car parks that are down are ones which would have historically been used by those customers commuting, with many now working from home. There is less need to use a car park. Having identified these car parks, we're looking into their actions and what we can do to increase the use of them. Corporate property. This element of the report will be discussed as part of the Leaders report later in the year, as there is an overlap with the Leaders portfolio and mine. Data protection and freedom of information. There have been a large increase in data protection individual rights requests, with 63 being received compared to last year of 42. During the last year, we've increased the response time of FOIs from 97 the previous year and 84% in 19/20. Economic development. Additional restriction grants were extended by government, and the team delivered until the end of March, providing support for 1,000 businesses, once again taking up 90% of the team's time during this period. In total, we've supported businesses to the tune of £3.6 million. The Youth Hub project has gone from strength to strength. We have been able to secure a second year of funding to cover the staffing of the project for the further 12 months. The workshop has recently moved location to a bigger unit in the Square. This has extra space, which enabled the team, with support from ICT, to set up a computer room so that users of the hub can directly access the internet to search for jobs, complete applications, and help improve their ICT skills. Just to give a few stats, in the first year, the workshop supported 227 people, 24 were referred from the DWP and 9 were walk-ins, with 49 appointments. 11 got jobs or apprenticeships, and 2 were supported to return to education. Also, the Surrey Heaths Independent Network launched on the 12th of September. It was good to see a number of companies come to the first event. This event will be moving around the borough in the coming months. ICT and digital. The ICT team have upgraded the AV system and broadcasting capabilities in the council chamber, which we are using tonight. A major project has been to consolidate our cloud services. This also has given us the opportunity to deliver applications to staff using the cloud-based Azure virtual desktop system. Agile working continues to move forward and is fully supported by the ICT team. As a result of the laptop deployment, over 100 pieces were distributed during COVID emergency, and in 2022 we've delivered 12 PCs for use in the workshop, and also some to the Afghan and Ukrainian refugees, and to Sophie and Chloe and Sophie, especially a fund. ICT have a project underway assessing IT provision for councillors. A capital bid for the equipment cost will be required. And service transformation is currently being delivered through the Star Chamber process in services across the council. This process allowed officers to bring forward initiatives to generate potential efficiencies, savings and income generation. The outcome of the Star Chambers process was presented to the June Executive, where close to 1.2 million of efficiencies and income generation initiatives were debated. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the officers for their hard work in all their relevant areas and departments. We really do appreciate everything they do on behalf of the residents of Surrey Heath, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Any questions? Councillor Wheeler.
Thanks very much. Snuck into the middle of this report is the report that Surrey County Council are taking back the outsourced provision of car parking enforcement and parking enforcement. And it says in here that they are going out to tender via a particular framework. I wonder if it's possible to get clarity from Surrey County Council as to how many companies actually qualified to respond to that tender, given the very specific way in which it was tendered. So I suppose it's trying to understand our borough's duty of care to our residents. And although this service, I appreciate, is a county council service that they had dispersed out to the boroughs, my concern is that having looked at the very careful wording of that tender, that very few companies will be in a position to respond to that tender. And it would be really good to know how many companies, which is not, I don't think, commercially insensitive, how many companies actually responded to it. So I wonder if we could ask for that clarification back. I also notice, and it's not going to be any big surprise to anybody in this chamber, just how poorly against the parking review, the parking charges in Chobham Car Park and the way in which that has performed as a percentage of the overall expenditure. I also seem to remember that when we reviewed those co-parking charges, there was the option to come back and review how successful it had been, and also to look at the impact on other areas. And just today, there is a survey that the Parish Council is undertaking because of the increase in the cost of emptying dog waste bins in Chobham Recreation Ground, which is a charitable trust that services the recreation ground. And I understand that there have been comments on social media about how the local sports clubs that currently use the recreation ground may need to look elsewhere because of the upturn in dog waste. And as I said, the parish council are actually considering now banning dogs from that recreation ground. So I think looking at that in the round, I would be really grateful if we could have some figures back. And also I understand there was an undertaking to liaise with Thames Heath Basin and Surrey Wildlife Trust to look at the increase, which is very difficult to do, on the common and the impact that those car parking charges have had on the common. The other thing that I'd just like to mention is, having parked in Camberley Town Centre car park, the main square car park last Friday, the smell of urine when I parked my car was absolutely overpowering, and there was faeces smeared on the wall next door to, I have an electric vehicle, so next door to the EV charging. And I just wondered who was responsible for, I've got an beside me, so it's something else obviously that a fellow councillor has experienced. I just wondered who was responsible for that and where it sits. Sorry, there are lots of questions in there, because actually as a welcoming point for our town centre, it was certainly not one that would welcome me back into Camberley, and if I didn't have a specific reason to come, I have to say I would have been really, really off-put by it, which is very disappointing. I noticed the car parking team and the whole post equivalents and the vacancies there, and I just wondered whether we are now going to have a surplus of enforcement officers when that goes back to county, or whether we're maybe considering retraining them and redeploying them to other enforcement areas. Sorry, a lot of questions on what I'm sure you hoped would be a relatively short paper.
No surprises at all. I have the answers to the relevant, reference to some of the questions you asked on shop and car park, because I made sure I had them in advance, which I'm happy to forward to you, okay? Now, I can go through them here. I mean, basically, and I will take these out of order, because I'm not going to be able to answer the first one, to be fair. So, reference the shop and car park, we did say we'd come back for review. We also said we would do regular checks, which we are doing. Bi-monthly, Green Spaces team are going to the car park. They're making notes of, and I've got the results of what they're doing, how many people are using it, speaking to residents that are using it, asking them for their feedback, which again, I've got the stats on. I'm not going to go through it now. I'm happy to forward to you afterwards, that's okay. As far as so that covers off, hopefully covers off that, and if it doesn't cover off everything, I'm more than happy to go into that further, okay? I'll take the third question next. Which car park was that you were parking in when you... Main Square, okay. I must admit, as someone that has parked in Main Square, I've not been lucky enough to smell that. Okay. Or just walk downstairs. That's my problem. I don't ever walk downstairs. Okay. Right, so obviously car parking does fall under me. It's not something I've come across. I will follow it up because I will check to see if there have been complaints, and we need to obviously look at that. I'm guessing it's not coming from the toilets. It's actually something that's happening because... Okay, fair enough. So I will take that on board. I wasn't aware of that, and I will take that away. As far as the SCC tender goes, I have no idea, to be fair, and I did turn around to Nick, and I don't know if Nick's got, Mr. Stevens has got any answers on that, or we can go away and check.
We certainly can. So I know that our colleagues in Woking have been having direct conversations with Surrey County Council in relation to this, so the first go-to people will be Woking. I will ask them the question. We also have a meeting with Surrey County Council ourselves to discuss parking and obviously verge maintenance as well, highway maintenance. So if I can't get a straight answer at the first conversation, I'll provide you with a response from the second.
Thank you for that. I mean, for those who are watching online, Nick Stevens' name came up as Louis Livingston. I can assure you he's not Louis Livingston. Sorry, getting back to Victoria Villa. Thank you.
If I can, sorry, there was also the question about our own staff and what we're doing with them. I appreciate they're still going to be responsible for our car parks, but it's just where we are with numbers.
So in relation to our staff, we don't have any staff who directly enforce on-street parking. They are Woking employees. And there are obviously conversations around 2P and other arrangements in relation to those staff, which we are not party to. There is the shared parking manager who covers the on-street enforcement on behalf of Woking. Clearly, there are conversations in relation to that, but that is a HR matter. In relation to our recruitment shortfalls at the moment, our vacancies, yes, we do hope that there is an opportunity here for us to recruit some competent, qualified CEOs for our off-street team.
Thank you very much. I got something else to, if Councillor Wheeler, you have finished, have you? Done? Thank you. I've got one point on parking. I mean, on social media, they do not fully understand, the people or residents of Surrey Borough Council do not understand parking is not under control. The wardens are actually under SCC, Surrey County Council. And I have got complaints, and I get bizarre, not bizarre, I get complaints that these wardens are hiding behind pillars and so on and so forth. I mean, there are hundreds of stories on social media. It is something the council, I would suggest, actually take this on board and make sure the residents understand that parking wardens are not our responsibility. But I don't blame the residents for assuming they are our responsibility. So either we work with Woking to actually mitigate this, or we go on a massive advertising event, but I don't think that's going to cost us money. So I'd actually work with Woking on this. Thank you for that. Councillor Bates and then Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to talk about car parking fees as well. So I'm going to kind of slightly add on to what Councillor Wheeler said. So if I look on page 19 in the car park fees, it was suggested that the season tickets, in effect, the additional season tickets, in effect, go over and above the loss of car park fees. And certainly that's true for some of the cases. However, it isn't true in areas that the committee, when we discussed the call-in, the number of areas that we were concerned about. So if you note from there, Main Square and Knoll Road are doing very successful, which means the council overall are doing very successful. And you'll recall that those were areas that this committee had no concern about and fully supported. However, areas where we didn't, namely Chobham and Wharf Road, and we also see Borough Road and also Yorktown, if you add together those two, in fact, they're less than the parking review. Now, okay, we're not talking about very large sums at this point, although in the case of Yorktown, we could be talking about £12,000 over the course of a year, which is quite a significant amount of money. But it does suggest that many of the points and concerns that were raised by the committee when we had our call in are in fact being proved to be correct. So I would encourage that not only Chobham be relooked at, but particularly Yorktown, because that is obviously being an issue. And I'm aware that there may be wider discussions, but also some of these other ones where we're not hitting that target. The issue for that is it's not just the financial issue, but we also need, as has been outlined, to understand the wider issue within the community. If it's not working financially, is it having the impact in communities? So I would encourage Councillor Garrett to look not just at Chobham, but the other three areas where there is an issue as well. Secondly, and I'd also echo about the urine, by the way. I'm afraid I have noticed that, and that is a problem, particularly, I have to say, in Main Square. Going on to paragraph 3.6 and the procurement system for a new control and management system, I'm afraid I'm going to bore some of you by talking about something I've raised on several previous occasions, which is that I would encourage the council to look at whether it is possible to have a system which recognises different value for car parking spaces within the same car park. It is not correct to suggest that when you go in a car park, every space has the same value. People want to park on the ground floor, they want to park next to the lift, they don't want to park on the top floor, we have unequal use, and I think we're not necessarily there at the moment, but we must be getting quite close to the time when technologically we can have different values on different floors in different car parks. So if you park on the top floor, you pay less than if you park on the ground floor. That equalises out our use and I think actually makes a better system for people. And I think that's something which we should be looking at doing if it is technologically possible to do. It must be getting quite close to doing that at the moment. The final point I wanted to comment on is, I'm going to be a bit cheeky, Chair, because it's going to go back to your question from earlier, but if I go to the very last sentence in the report on paragraph 7.3, which relates to the Star Chamber savings in regard to service transformation, so it is relevant to this agenda item, and clearly it does refer there to £660,000 of Star Chamber savings identified this year. As you have alluded to, and as has been heard, we're going to have to do more on that. So I guess my question is, are we going to have a further round of Star Chamber in regard to this current year? We won't get into the politics of that, but just, is that going to happen? Or what reports are going to be coming forward in relation to that? Because clearly it is likely that we will need to do so.
Thank you very much for that. I want to, Councillor Garrett.
So firstly, first point, reference the, and I just to check, Councillor Bates, that was Chobham Borough, Yorktown and Wharf Road you're referring to, wasn't it? Okay. I will certainly, bearing in mind this has only been going for a couple of months, yeah, and in fact Wharf even less than that, I agree that we did agree that we would look at it, and we certainly can look at it. We can look at, we've got the stats for all the numbers and the figures and all that sort of stuff, so we can certainly review that again. I wouldn't suggest we did that straight away, but certainly within maybe the next, we can look at it on a 6-monthly or 3-monthly basis, whatever. We've got the stats and we can be looking at that. As I said to you, some of those car parks is not a surprise because people aren't using them because they were using them because they were commuting and are now not commuting. So, and we are looking at other options for those car parks, but I take on board your point with reference to that. Technology reference levels in car parks. I take on board your point, and I will certainly, we can certainly have that conversation with the officer reference to car park. In fact, we were on a meeting today discussing the potential looking at new systems. I'm guessing what you're saying is a level or a car or a particular space would mean you would have to have a sensor in the space that relates to that car. And although that should be feasible, if the ANPR is downstairs and you're going upstairs, it doesn't know where you're going to go unless you have a sensor. So I understand what you're asking for. Technology-wise, I don't know we're necessarily there. I know some car parks you can go in and it tells you that car park is being used on space is being used or not. But I'm guessing the infrastructure for that can be quite expensive. So I'm not saying we can't do it. There is probably technology there, and we can certainly go away and have a look at that. Star Chamber, I'm looking over to my colleagues over on the other side.
I think it's appropriate either the CEO or the Section 151
I'm not
officer.
quite sure how we stand on the Star Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bates, for the question. It is, I think, that the Star Chamber has actually overachieved its savings target for this financial year. In the medium-term financial strategy, we had a target of £475,000 to achieve. The £660,000 for this year actually is overachievement, which can only be commendable, and that will actually go towards meeting the target in future years. It would be lovely to think if I set a 4-year medium-term financial strategy, I could put my feet up for the next 3 years. Unfortunately, the process we follow is that medium-term financial strategy will be reviewed and revised and reported to Council in February, which will include certainly the new emerging pressures of inflation and debt financing costs that I discussed earlier when I answered the Chair's question. So we are certainly noting it, we are taking account of it, and even during the budget setting process now, we are starting to identify, what the pressures like to be for the contractually obliged inflation and unavoidable costs and growth, and then looking at measures of how we'll offset that. And I'm not so naive as to not expect there to be a further round of either efficiencies or savings to be produced to bring the budget into balance. As I did mention earlier, we do have a very strong reserve position in the Council, and one of the discussions I'll be having around the budget time was whether, as I'd like to try and say, we would set a balanced budget by the 4th year of the new MTFS. It may be that due to the macroeconomic pressures that exist in the world, and certainly in this country, I will not be able to do that, but certainly I'll continue working and striving to a balanced budget in the short to medium term.
Thank you very much. Councillor Garrett, do you want to say something on it, or
No,
are you happy? I just want to add a couple of points, then Councillor, on the same point, a different one. Okay, Councillor White wants to come in first, and after that, yeah? I just want to add something to what Councillor Bates said regarding Star Chamber savings, so on and so forth, and to your reply, Section 141 officer, is, as I was leaving for this meeting, you will see it in tomorrow's newspapers, I presume, or the Council may get a notification very soon, because they are going to, public sector is going to be, they're asking the public sector to make more savings. So if the pressure is on us as a council, it's going to come down all the way down to us. So this, I would strongly suggest, as a council, as a scrutiny chair, I would strongly suggest that you and the exec take this on board very seriously, because the pressures are going to be not only the interest rate, other pressures are adding on to this now. Thank you very much. Councillor White.
A few months ago, I brought to the attention of Parking Services that there was a white van parked in the ground floor of Main Square, only to be told that the van belonged to the council and it was going to be sold. It's been there for 6 months that I know of. It has flat tyres, it's in a bad state. If that had been any one of us that had parked a vehicle there and left it there, we'd have been fined to the hilt. Nothing's been done about it since. I just wondered if Councillor Garrett could give an update or whether something could be done about it. It just doesn't look right. the tyres are shredded, or two of the tyres are shredded on it, and you know, it's in an ordinary car parking space. It's not as if it's in staff car parking space, and I just feel it should be moved. It doesn't look right.
I don't know who wants to answer that. Councillor Garrett.
I'll give you 20 quid for it. It's not worth 20 quid. So, Councillor White, thank you for that. You may be aware of that about, probably, me personally aware of it. I know you'd about 4 to 6 weeks ago. I did email asking for it to be moved. I've got to be honest, I don't know it has been. It hasn't been. They are going to answer my question then. So, in which case, is that something we can...
I can send you pictures.
No, I had a picture. I will be chasing it up tomorrow morning.
Thank you for that, Councillor Garrett. Councillor Ditch.
Thank you. Go on a slightly different tact now, if I may. As everybody knows here, I'm a keen cyclist now and literally go everywhere on my bike. And I think that apparently some time ago, before I was a cyclist, there was one of the shops in the square that was a secure cycle store, right? I think that that's something we need to bring back, okay? And I'm not just speaking selfishly here. Having spoken to a lot of residents who also cycle, I'm not going to say how much my e-bike cost, but it was a lot of money, and I'm not prepared to leave my bike tied, locked up to one of those D-rings in the town centre, because they still get stolen. That we need secure cycle provision within the town centre. It's something that I will be raising in the Greener Futures working group. Have raised before, I think. But we're talking about economic development here. Now, I was in Woking at the weekend, and I was actually surprised. They have some secure cycle places there. I was actually quite surprised how many people cycle into Woking town centre. And I think that a part of that is, and now this is partly Surrey County Council's problem as well, in terms of the infrastructure. But if we provide infrastructure, I'm certain people will use it. So there needs to be, and I was speaking to Councillor Galliford earlier, some partnership work with the boroughs and the county council to get that infrastructure delivered. And I think that from a town centre perspective, purely, and an economic development perspective, we need to start looking at secure parking for bicycles. And like I say, I'm not going to say how much my bike was. It was cheap compared to what some of them cost. I've spoken to some cyclists. They pay over 10 grand for their bikes, incredibly. And there's no way they are going to leave them locked up on these D things in the town centre. So that's something I think we really need to look at so that we can support our businesses in the town centre, because that will drive traffic, I'm certain of it. That's my first point. My second point is the last committee of this committee and the previous portfolio holder, there was a discussion about Deliveroo, the Deliveroo situation, the adverse situation in the town centre with the way that they're parking and all the rest of it. And I suggested it that to that previous portfolio holder that actually, as painful as they may be and the trouble that they cause, they do contribute an enormous amount to the local economy. Okay? Don't know if any of you use Deliveroo. I've used it once or twice. The fact that they're in the town centre and they're causing that problem tells you how much they're valued by local residents. Therefore, my suggestion to the previous portfolio holders, we need to provide facilities for those drivers to park safely and not, let's say, in an antisocial way. And that's something as well that we need to look at, because that in itself supports economic development in our town centres villages and so on. So the previous portfolio holder said he would go away and look at that. Never heard a dicky bird. I want assurances from you tonight, please, Sean, that that is going to be looked at seriously. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ditch. I actually endorse what you said about safe parking for bikes. I mean, about 4 months or 5 months ago, I was in Ealing Broadway. They have literally one of the shops turned into a safe parking shed for the bikes. Sorry, let me also finish off the other point you raised. For Deliveroo cyclists or the mobile, most of these shops like McDonald's or Cockeroo or whatever it is, they got a back door. They should be parking using the service entrance to collect it and deliver, rather than using the main road. I mean, that's something, it's within our control. We should be able to do that. So I'm going to leave that with the portfolio holder, Councillor Garrett. Sorry, Councillor Ditch.
Because you just reminded me, actually, Chairman, something that I should have said. That I was in London recently, and they had these like Nissan Hut shaped. Do you know what I mean by Nissan Hut? They're like that shaped, with the and you use a QR code with your phone and NFC to unlock it, and they're really secure and they've got cameras on them. I would pay for a service like that, and I'm almost certain other cyclists would too. So there's a revenue generating opportunity that we should explore too. I know that I work with another town centre, I won't mention who they are, professionally, who are looking at this. So like I say, I think there's an opportunity there that we might be missing, and something that I hope is not going to take years to deliver. It's something, there are off-the-shelf solutions available now. Let's exploit them. Thank you.
Thank you. So, the bike storage shop, it was on next to Wilkinson's, wasn't it? Which is now a sushi bar, I believe. I think the reason it was there initially was because it was a unit that wasn't being used. It looked like it was obviously decided it would be a good use of it. I don't know if it was ever that busy. I can't remember. I know there were bikes in it. I suppose. Yeah. So the issue if you use a unit is if you're using the unit for that, then you're not using it for something else, and I'm guessing you're not getting rent, etc., on it. So, and we would be better off having a unit outside rather than a unit in the shopping centre, which obviously is shut in the evening potentially. So there's those things to look at. Obviously, we can look at it. I suppose it also comes under parking as well. So it's not something I had thought about, but I will certainly take it away and have a conversation with both economic development team and obviously the parking side. The Deliveroo Just Eat was on a meeting today, and we were discussing that. There's a meeting next week with Surrey Police and the Atrium and the Square and economic development team and parking to have a conversation about Deliveroo and Just Eats, because it is obviously causing a problem. But it is, I take your point totally. If it's that busy, that's because people are using the services, which means they're using the shops, which is obviously a good thing. Now, one thing I found out today, which I wasn't aware of, one of the biggest issues is you've got two types of Deliveroo. I'll use Deliveroo as an example, people parking. There's the ones that have just arrived to pick up the food they're collecting, but you've also got the ones that have arrived because they're coming to collect food but isn't ready, so they're sitting there for 15 to 20 minutes while they're waiting for the food to be ready. So, and there's smart geocaching stuff that can be done by the service provider that says basically, so the idea is to look at maybe parking them somewhere else, holding until they're ready, and then when they know they're ready, then they come into town, which means you will then be cutting down the number of people that are parking in the high street. Okay, now that's literally a conversation I've had today. It's obviously something we're open to discussions on. We know it's an issue. I've been in town on a Friday picking up my daughter from her dance school, and they've been strewn everywhere. So I've seen it. So yeah, it's certainly something on the radar. It's certainly something we're discussing, and certainly it would be something we can bring back in the future.
Would you consider the service? Would you kindly consider the service area to be used as a pickup?
It's one of the areas that was discussed, or is being discussed.
Councillor Galliford.
Thank you. Firstly, just going back to the bicycles, totally agree. We do need secure parking. And I'd like to reiterate, it's not just for expensive bikes. If you're on a low income and you bought a second-hand bike that maybe is 20 quid, that could still be, you know, something that you really rely on. So it's for absolutely everybody that is essential. My question, however, is around 3.6, parking services, starting procurement process to replace car park control and management system in multi-storey car parks. Firstly, it's expected the new system will cost around 300,000, which seems rather a lot of money considering the amount we generate. And the other point I'd like to raise, here it says a principal aim is to reduce the number of payments by cash. I mean, you know, I'm not sure we should be spending 300 grand in order to just reduce the number of payments by cash, but also there is a very strong drive, forgive the pun, as we're talking about parking, to maintain cash within our system, because there seems to be some sort of political ideology to drive us towards digital currencies, and there are a lot of issues around that, and I'm very aware of residents who would not be terribly happy if everything had to be digital. So I just wanted to raise that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I take on your points about not just e-bikes, so obviously any bikes, so I totally get that point. Reference to parking procurement. I had a conversation about, again, today we were talking about budgets and spendings for the future year. And I had to get some clarification on this. So basically, what we're looking at is we're having to replace the AMPR system because it's about 8 years old. And it's out of date or will be very soon. And to do the car parking systems that we're looking to do, which most people have got, most places you go these days.
Sorry, Councillor Garrett, can I get you to speak?
Sorry, I'm trying to talk right now. So to put in place the systems we need up-to-date AMPR systems. And to do that, we would have to replace the infrastructure. And to do that, depending on whose system you use, will depend on what app potentially you're going to end up using, and obviously the costs involved with that. Some might have cheaper infrastructure, but their app would be more expensive, etc., etc. So it's a conversation piece. But if we want to carry on with the technology system, which going back to Councillor Bates's point earlier on, if we want to be using the technology, then we have to be looking at changing the infrastructure. That's not obviously changing it to the sensor system, etc. It is a lot of money. I totally get that, and I did question it today, and I want to have more conversations about it. So it is on my radar, but basically we are going to have to replace it, the infrastructure in the car parks, and I think potentially put it into other car parks to follow that system through. Reference to cash, it will not be cashless completely, but a lot of people do like cashless, and people are using less cash, but it will not be cashless in its entirety as far as I understand it. So I take on your point, because not everybody will have smartphones and have the relevant apps, and will obviously want to be playing with cash. But it is on my radar, and we literally are having conversations now about the actual costs involved. Like you, I'm a resident. That's a lot of money to be spending on a car parking system.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, I endorse the question actually regarding the value for money and the return of capital employed. I'm looking at the Section 151 officer. He understands the terminology, return of capital employed. So it's something you can work with the Section 151 officer to make sure it's value. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much, Councillor Garrett.
Thank you.
Well done again.
I'm glad Mr. Chines, yeah. Sorry. Councillor Tapper cannot, sorry, he's far away. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just reminding you I couldn't hear a word you were saying there because you didn't have your mic on. Thank you.
Gets cut off. I don't know why. There you go. Anyway, planning control. Councillor Page, who is going to introduce the
Thank you
paper.
very much, Chairman. I hope you can hear me.
Not me, him.
Are we all good to go? Brilliant. It is a large paper, and so I don't intend to read it to you, but I will go through some of the highlights. So the portfolio, it's quite a large portfolio. We look after planning, policy and conservation. We look after development management, which is the planning applications that come into us. We look after drainage, although we've got a very small team on that. We have building controlled shared services. We have a little bit of land charges tucked in there. And another big area is planning enforcement. So I will go through that as quickly as I can. And I will be helped at the end by, as you say, the head of planning. So nobody will have missed the work that we've done in the local plan area. And I'll say at the outset that I'm very grateful to all the councillors who sit on that local plan group that help with that, because that there's a consensus there and it's very democratic, and we've got a local plan that everybody, I think, agrees to, or certainly the draft plan. So that's our key work programme covering the period. So that plan will come and cover the period from 2019 to 2038 eventually. So it's important that we get that right. So over the period of the last June to this year, we've made significant progress. And we've been out with consultation all the way with our draft Surrey local plan. And we have some preferred options that we have developed for the way that we set out development within the borough. We have a load of evidence-based studies over the 12-month reporting period. And just to highlight a few, we've included publication of a new strategic land availability assessment. Most of us will know that's called the SLAR in shorthand. We've had sustainability appraisals around habitats regulations assessments. We've got draft infrastructure delivery plan. We have a green belt study, which is quite emotive. And of course, we're looking at gypsy and traveller sites identification, and that work is really continuing. So we've produced approximately 56 local plan policies that have been drafted and reviewed and presented to the local plan working group. So there's quite a significant amount of work there. And those workshops that we have, mostly online, I think have been very productive. And I'm very grateful to some of those questions and the input of councillors to that help shape that going forward. So the emerging issues for us and what's been consulted on with the public and the stuff that's come back to me is that there's a support for the need to protect the green belt and areas important for biodiversity. So we're looking to do that, to support that. There's general support for the need for new housing, but some specific concerns about the level of development in villages and some of the draft allocated housing sites. There is support for the need of the regeneration of Camberley Town Centre, and that's something we should all look for. And what I would remind, and we're often talking about, this criticism that we often talk about Camberley, and the villages don't get a look in. Well, Camberley really is the driver for generating the income that comes to the borough as a whole and gets redistributed. So it's a very important element that we look after Camberley Town Centre as our jewel in the crown of the borough. So I make no apology that we should focus attention on Camberley Town Centre, and we do focus on the villages too. There is a concern about the need to plan carefully for gypsy and traveller sites, and there's some concerns about the draft allocation of the areas we've looked at, Diamond Ridge Woods, and I'm sure that there is some concern about some of the other newer areas that have come on the list that we have gone out recently for consultation. So I'm acutely aware of that. So one of the things that we look around is our planning policy and our work with the other boroughs in terms of sustainability options, cycling to work schemes, cycle paths, and some of those other things come into that development plan, the sort of neighbourhood planning operations. So walking and cycling infrastructure and those things. So there's papers on that. So our planning policy also undertook a housing delivery test, which demonstrates our housing completion rates are at 132% of the local housing needs. So there was some doom and gloom when I first started coming into this, that perhaps Surrey Heath wasn't meeting its housing targets. Well, we've sliced through that and we've cut the figures, and we understand that at the moment we are delivering things on target. These targets are given to us by government. They're very difficult sometimes to get to, especially with the way that the geography is in Surrey Heath, with the amount of greenbelt areas, conservation areas, sites of special scientific interest, Thames Basin Heath, and all those other constraints that we have on our land. So to exceed the housing target so far, I think is remarkable. So I support those housing targets with some tables in the report, and I'm sure that if you look at those tables, we're in an improving position actually. So we're coming to it late in some circumstances, but the figures are improving. So the government attaches importance to housing delivery performance, and it's significant to note that since the introduction of the government standard methodology figure for calculating housing needs, the annual target for housing deliveries has been exceeded in each year for us. So I think that's something to celebrate. This places the borough in a robust position in government assessments of our housing delivery performance, because that's all part of the local plan and the soundness of the local plan going forward. So I'm fairly confident that we are reaching the end of a local plan period to put in 2023 that's something that's going to be acceptable. There are some caveats around gypsy and traveller sites, but that work is ongoing, so we've not finished there yet. It's not a done deal. A highlight of the report is that in the last monitoring year, 30% of all new net homes were delivered as affordable homes. And there is a kind of argument around what's affordable within Surrey Heath, but our actual level of housing completions has met the target of 35% in most instances. So the actual level of affordable housing, for instance, 21-22, was 86%, and that's well beaten our target of 35%. So I'm sure that members are acutely aware, and certainly the members of the local plan team are acutely aware that there's a backlog for the needs of the gypsy and traveller community in terms of pitches. There is a set target delivery of 19 gypsy and travellers pitches for us by the end of 2027, and at the moment we have only identified 2 pitches. So that's going to be a very challenging target for us. Whether we will meet that, I don't know. We're doing a lot of work with that, with consultation, and as I said before, that work is ongoing. I'm confident that our team, the development team, have not left anything unlooked at in terms of turning over every stone and looking at every square foot of our borough to find pitches. And I know that councillors have been set that task too, and I know that Councillor Bates has been very vocal in the past about prompting us to have a look at our own areas, and we're acutely aware that we have to perform on that. But the jury's out and there's still some work to do. Moving over to development management, we have struggled in the past with planning officers and getting bums on seats with those professionals. We still are, but I'm happy to say that just lately we've managed to hire people and change the structure of the team to get the people that we need. And so we are meeting our targets for development management and in planning applications. So that's good. In terms of our quality of our planning application determination and the professionalism, I have to say, of our planning committee, most of the appeals that, you know, people are upset the way that planning has gone, most of our appeals are not upheld. So the determination of our officers and our recommendations and the agreement and the consensus with councillors to support the papers generally, and not always, but generally, has proved that we are having 78% of appeals are dismissed. So we've won 28 of those appeals. And that's against, we've got a performance rate of 78%, that's against a council target of 65. So we are improving there. We are improving because we had the Planning Advisory Service come in and do some work with us. We invited them in to do a root and branch study of the way that we our development management team was looked at. And they come up with a number of different ways of doing things differently. The way that we can support officers and triage the development and put more junior officers onto the more junior aspects and use our very experienced planning officers to hit some of the more difficult and larger planning applications that come in. So we are doing some further work on that, and we've not finished. But I think generally the service has improved. And as you note in the paper, there is an undersupply nationally of planning officers, but we've been rather lucky that we have additional people in, and we've reduced our reliance on contractors who perhaps don't give it as much ownership as perhaps a fully employed person would. So that's it on development management. Drainage is one of those areas where we have a small team, but we are using that small team in conjunction with Surrey County Council, and we have done some partnership and some work with the Environment Agency. And so we've looked at some of the resilience of our flood defences. Some of that's been quite difficult due to COVID and what came out of COVID. If you've ever tried to be in the construction industry, it's very difficult getting hold of materials these days, and that's been difficult for us in some of our flood defences. But I'm happy to say that Wayne Purden, who's our engineer, has looked at different products that's on the market, and some more sustainable stuff, even though it's made of plastic, last longer, and we've managed to use some of those materials which are more readily available than sand and sandbags and concrete to do some work around that. So there has been a flood alleviation study done by our team, and mostly, if you know the geography of Surrey Heath, our concentration is on the River Bourne, which affects certainly Chobham and then the villages upstream of Chobham, West End, Windlesham and Bagshot and Lightwater. So there are some schemes around those areas that are ongoing and that we're putting in. So some of that's described in here. I'm happy to take questions later, but I might struggle a bit because Wayne's not in the room, I've noticed. So I might rely on Mr. Chinier to help me. But there is some work going around Staple Hill, and this all surrounds Chobham because, as you know, most of the people in Chobham swim rather well. Broadford Lane, Philpot Lane, Emmett's Mill, Castle Grove Road. So a lot of work commencing there, a lot of work in liaison with landowners and riparian owners and people that have land. But certainly the land that Surrey Heath owned is well looked after from our point of view. There have been some studies around Chobham in particular, and there is potential for more work to happen following some work that we've done in partnership with the Environment Agency and Surrey County Council. So watch this space. I'm sure there might be a question on that later. There is some funding from developers that have not come through around the Pennypot Lane flood alleviation area, and it's all to do with some difficulties about understanding who is the legal landowner and what kind of transactions are going on there. There is some work to be done on the Lightwater flood alleviation, even though that we've just put some work in around the M3 discharges using that plastic alleviation stuff as well around the Lightwater Country Park area. So that's flooding, and we're happy to take questions later and see if we can answer them, and if we can't, we might have to do a separate written paper to you on certain things. On building control, real good success story. The building control services, as you know, building control used to be run by local authorities in isolation, really, but it was opened up to the market, and the market now can compete against us. But our building control services retain 71% of the market share within our area, and I think that's to be commended. The team have looked at 21 dangerous structures over the last year, and we've carried out a phenomenal 5,586 site inspections, which is a really, really high number. And so there are no real worries, as because building control are 100% compliance with all our statutory timescales. So they've met something called ISO 9001. I don't know what that is. Land charges, we provide a service for land charges, but I think land charges is a kind of diminishing operation for local authorities at the borough level, because I think the government are going to look at a web-based system whereby it's going to circumnavigate the local authority in the future. So we may lose some revenue from land charges going forward, but it's something that we're watching. I'll end up with planning enforcement. When I first came as a councillor in the borough, and I was certainly concerned that we weren't as robust, shall we say, in looking after complaints about planning enforcement. That's changed considerably over the time I've been in this council, and it's accelerating, I think. So if you have a look at the table in the report, we're looking at quite a number of planning enforcement cases. So in comparison to the same reporting last year, the number of enforcement notices issued has increased. We had 13 during 21-22 compared to 1 during 2021. So there are some high-profile things that we've done, and we are looking at triaging those as well and putting some focus of attention, and that's reflected in the number of notices we serve. And there are some data in the report about where we are. We are still, though, a little bit worried about personnel and getting human resources into that group, because there have been a number of people that have churned away from Surrey Heath, and we hope that we can find some people to replace them so that we can continue to improve in that service and hit that target, which has been rather good. I'm a little bit worried that may go off the boil, but we'll see. So that's my notes on the planning and enforcement area, and I'm very happy, Chairman, to take some questions. I may not be able to answer all of them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Page. I must congratulate you on a very detailed explanation of your paper, which is very easy to read, and from your verbal summary, very easy to understand as well. And being part of the plan, local plan, I must again congratulate you for the way you have actually brought it up to this stage. Well done to you and to your officers. Councillor Deitch is now first. Let me take the room, because this is going to be long. So let me give Councillor Deitch first. I think Councillor Tapper, then Councillor Victoria, Wheeler, for the moment. I'm sure there'll be a bit more to come. Can we actually, because it's going to be a long one, let's actually try and keep the questions as short as possible and with little bit of statements. Thank you.
Well, I'll keep this very short. I just want to thank Gavin and the team. Significant improvement in terms on your last item just there on enforcement. I'm sure we can all give examples of where it's not gone right and so on. And I suppose, you know, as councillors, as critical friends of the officers as we're supposed to be in scrutiny, the very nature is that we're often complaining about things. But I just want to say thank you on a top job. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions. First one is actually on page 46 of our agenda, which is actually the local plan document itself. On page 46 under Sustainability and Climate Change, we have an item there for renewable energy generation. You'll remember, I'm sure, that renewable generation, energy generation is part of the Climate Change Action Plan as something that the council itself is supposed to be looking into in order to exploit its own properties to best possible advantage to generate renewable energy to reduce the council's own energy bills. I am, however, very surprised to see under the targets, no target. Why is there no target? When are we going to get a target for this? When are we going to hear what the council is actually going to propose to do to generate its own renewable energy and meet the aspirations of the Climate Change Action Plan? That's the first question. Second question is on the planning appeals. And Mr. Chinner will be well aware, I'm sure, of what I'm going to say here. It's gratifying to hear that we are winning a number of our appeals. He will be well aware, however, that we don't win them all. And in particular, one issue that I raised with the officer in question at one of the planning meetings was with regard to an appeal which was upheld when it went to appeal on exactly the same grounds as another appeal that had been submitted on a virtually identical planning application which have been upheld on exactly the same grounds. And I said at the time, why are we not learning our lessons? And it appears that maybe a full stop was in the wrong place, and that justified us refusing this particular application, almost in the certain knowledge that that application would go to appeal, would be appealed on exactly the same grounds as the one we lost previously, and true enough, that's exactly what happened. I did ask at that time, when are we going to learn our lessons? Why do we have to be pedantic to the T about every single planning application when anybody with any sense would actually look at those applications and say, hang on, we've had one of these before. Perhaps we ought to review this and not simply go and bash it against the wall again and have our nose blooded. The last thing is on drainage. And you will probably be aware that I'm also a trustee of Frimley Fuel Allotments. One of the ones that I'm surprised not to see in the list there is Frimley Fuel Allotments, Linden Sangs. Yes, it's Frimley Fuel Allotments land, but Surrey Heath Borough Council is responsible for the watercourses that run through the Sangs, and there is a major watercourse that runs through there. My colleague on the Board of Trustees, Tony Hyam, was working with Wayne Purden, and a lot of work has been done on improving that watercourse and reducing the flooding in the Sangs that resulted from the blockages that had occurred there before. But it was my understanding that there was still work outstanding, so I'm surprised that Linden Sangs doesn't appear in this list. Could I perhaps ask for a report on what it is understood by the council is the current situation with regard to Linden Sangs, and when it believes whether there is still some more work to be done, and if so, when that work will be completed. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Page or Councillor Page.
Thank you. I'll try and take some of those and answer them, Councillor Tapper. Renewable energy generation, I think is an excellent question. Thank you for that. I think that we've not really set a target yet, certainly for our own buildings, because perhaps we probably want to knock our buildings down anyway. So I think that perhaps our targets might be delayed while we decide what we're going to do with our buildings and how we're going to rebuild them. And I certainly think that we would be looking at that as, you know, as we develop those plans. Certainly we'd look at that. I know that the government's looking at that, and through building control, they're looking at new technology like air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and building some of those into the new aspects of the building control documentation. So hopefully we'll see something along there. I'll ask Mr. Chinaya to answer some of that as well. On the planning appeals, obviously each planning application is done on its own merits, and it's very difficult to start to compare. You can compare, of course, and it's natural for you to do that. But I think the planning officers do the best that they can with the legislation that they've got to look at each individual site on its own merits. So, yes, you could say that they're similar, but there are some technical nuances to the situation which might get them to determine something in their own way. And I'm, you know, looking at the figures, we generally get things right, and we're not going to win every appeal, and that's why the appeal process is there. And I'm sure Mr. Chinaya will develop that one too. As far as the drainage is concerned, most of the reports on here are where we've got sort of troublesome areas, and so I'm very pleased that Mr. Purden's done some work on Linden Sangs before, and it's obviously not popped its head up over the parapet for us, but I will make a note of that and come back and see if we can't get some a more you know, targeted information about Linden Sangs. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mr. Chinaya.
Thank you, Councillor Page. I think, just to add, I think on Councillor Tapper's point about the planning appeal, I do note your comments because you did email me about that at the time, and also considering the first appeal was allowed, in a second appeal. I think, as Councillor Page has said, each application is assessed on its own merits, really, and not all planning applications, fortunately, are the same. We could use some of the commentary used by the planning inspector in the appeal decision, but we felt like, given it was, I think it was in the Greenbelt as well, the application, we felt that the openness point was not considered to be acceptable, and we went with our own policies. We don't win all appeals, and I think on this occasion the planning inspector sided with the applicant and allowed that appeal. That's a bit of a learning from us as well. We'll have a look at the applications again and look at the appeal decisions and take a better informed judgment on a similar application in the future.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wheeler.
Chair, I'm happy for the other councillors to go first in the hope that some of them will cover some of the copious points that I'd like to go over. So if
I shall invite Councillor Bates.
Well, the pressure's on now, isn't it? Okay. So let's talk. Firstly, I need to declare an interest because I'm a community representative of Frimley Fuel, which is different to Councillor Tapper, so who is a council appointee. So I'll just declare that for the purposes of this meeting. But we're not making any decisions about Frimley Fuel allotments tonight. I only had 2 points. So the first was about appeals, which has just been touched upon, and I believe I'm right in saying I'm not on the Planning Applications Committee, but there was or used to be, or perhaps still is, an annual report on appeals. Because the issue for me has always been that I completely agree that we will not win every appeal. What we try and do, however, is to try and identify the learning points, as Mr. Trudeau has rightly identified. Some of those are going to be officer issues and some are going to be members. I suppose my concern as an interested observer, having never served on the committee, is that sometimes it is pointed out to members when, quite rightly, that there are occasions when perhaps there is a risk of an appeal, and sometimes officers are correct in stating that, and sometimes members are actually correct in stating the decision which is then upheld by an inspector. So it's interesting to see how many occasions we find, which are very rare, I'm pleased to say, and we are very high performing in this, which is credit to, I think, officers and members actually in regard to that. But I think it's important to continually review when appeals are not upheld. My assumption is most of those will actually be officers, not because of any issue about officers, but purely because more are actually dealt with by delegated, but I may be incorrect in that. How many a member overturns of officer recommendations, and what are the learning points in regard to that? And I think that needs to be done annually. It sounds as if it already is. The other point I wanted to make, which Councillor Page did allude to, is regarding gypsy and traveller sites. And he did allude quite rightly to the fact there's been a further consultation. And I'm pleased to say that some members did actually put forward some sites, which I'm aware were considered and for various reasons were ruled out. However, as of July, there were 6 wards where, to the best of my knowledge, there is currently no site, nor were any sites put forward, and nor am I aware that any meetings took place to try and identify those sites. Now, some of those members of those wards are here tonight, so maybe they can update and... I'm going to read them out. So the ones that I'm aware of that, as of that time, had not put forward any areas, which I say happy to update it, and maybe you're aware of more conversations than me. Watchits was one, St Paul's, Frimley, Mitchett and Deep Cut, although I accept there was discussion in regard to Deep Cut barracks at that time, Heatherside and Parkside. Now, well, then outline those. Then I'll be, as I say, I'm happy as of July. That was the sites that were put forward. There were 3 in Frimley Green that were put forward, but the key point is, but even if some of those are, there are still some members who haven't grasped this. Now, in fairness to Councillor Page, I know you do, and you have outlined it on a number of occasions. But can you just, for the benefit of any councillors who still haven't had these conversations, or perhaps ask the officers to outline for us all the risk to this council if we do not find enough sites and do not therefore have a viable local plan?
Before I come back to the other councillors, would you like to answer the last point, please? Because that's very important. As if you don't find the right number of gypsy and traveller sites, what happens?
Well, Mr. Chairman and councillors, it could mean that all our work is undone because we don't have a viable local plan in the eyes of the inspectors. But I would say that other boroughs have had similar issues in the past and their local plans have gone through, because what we can do is demonstrate that we've done the work to look at every square inch of the borough. So I'm not saying that we will fail. I think that we need to keep doing the work and finding those sites. But it's incumbent on us to keep the pressure up and to get as many sites as we can, or look at as many sites as we can, and scientifically prove that we can't do it for whatever reason, sustainability, it might be contamination, it might be that they're not suitable for, you know, and it's mostly rural areas, it might be that they're just not suitable for habitation in that area because of flooding or air quality or some of the other things that we look at. But at least, and I agree with Councillor Bates, that it's incumbent on us all to find those sites. But in defence of the wards that he did read out, and I'm sure that Mr. Shania will support this, they're in areas where they're extremely built up and urbanised anyway, and there really isn't the real estate available in those areas, to my mind, and to the officers that have done the work. So that may be a reason why those wards, you know, we go to the foot of the list, if you like, for looking at sites. But I'll pass you over to Mr. Shania, who's much more versed than me.
Sorry, before you pass it on, Mr. Shania, I just want to make observation. Does it mean by the end of a process that we don't get the number of sites? We are still going to put it forward and hope and pray we don't fail with our plan. Is it the idea?
I'd push that back to you, Councillor Malvagan, and what would you do?
I'm not the chair of that committee, it's you.
So what I'm saying to you is that we will leave no stone unturned, and indeed those officers are working extremely hard at that. And I must say that in the last couple of months at the work and the consultations that we've done at various places, it's been extremely taxing on them to be able to look, you know, the neighbours of those sites that we have identified, who are quite emotional about that. And so they've had a lot of pressure personally on them, standing up on their hind legs and talking to the neighbours. And I just want to, you know, reiterate the hard work that's gone into that, but also, you know, some of the the unfairness, because they're in the front line of some of the comments that come from the public. It's understandable. I'm big and bold, and I'm an ex-forces guy, and I like to go to these things and have my chest poked, but that's not fair on some of our officers sometimes. So just put yourself in their position. But to, you know, to ultimately answer your question, if we've done the work and we still don't find these things, to my mind, we've put a very robust local plan together, and we'll see what happens. It's in the lap of the gods.
Thank you very much. My question was simple. I mean, you're the chair. You need to make your decision alongside Mr. Shania and the full council. Mr. Shania, before you answer, Councillor Helen Whitcroft would like to ask a question.
No, it's not a question, Chair. I'd just like to correct the record that Mitchett and Deepcut councillors met within a week of the leader's request and wrote to him with our suggestions. I'd just like the record to be altered, please.
Sorry, Chair, am I answering the question, Councillor Whitcroft, or okay, sorry.
We haven't got the sites, the soundness of the plan, is it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we will have to see what happens after this consultation, which is closed on the 19th of September, and we'd have to form a view about how we progress the plan. Coming back to your points, Councillor Bates, I mean, officers have worked extremely hard and tirelessly to find the sites. Members have put forward sites as part of the call for sites, and also when the leader made it quite clear for councillors to engage with the team. Unfortunately, some of the sites which are put forward have been unacceptable, inappropriate, a lot of issues with them, and in areas where it cannot be developed, like going forwards. As part of the consultation, which is ongoing at the moment, and as part of the executive report, we are continually assessing those sites. We haven't formed a view yet on the acceptability of those sites or whether or not they're going to come forward. And that will come clearer nearer the time, most probably in November, once all those sites have been fully considered and assessed by our consultants going forward. In terms of the soundness of the plan, obviously, Councillor Page has alluded to that some plans have moved forward without provisions of gypsy and traveller pictures. We're not saying that is the case here, but that's something we will have to look into nearer the time if that does happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The CEO would like to make a statement.
Thank you, Chairman. And really just following up on Councillor Bates's question, the local plan is certainly an area of risk, and not having enough site does risk, as Councillor Page has said, that the local plan is found unsound, and that really means the council having to start again. But there's another risk as well, which is if we don't demonstrate delivery against housing need, then if a developer, a landowner, came forward and put pitches on a piece of land or applied and was turned down because we felt it was completely inappropriate, they would have a much better chance of winning an appeal because they would use in their defence that the council had not met the identified housing need for gypsy and traveller sites and travelling show people. So there's a double level of vulnerability.
Thank you for that. Right, so I'm going to let Councillor Bates come back, and then I'm going to Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. And just to clarify, if the Mitchell Deep Cut Council said they did meet and send some things to the leader, I'm more than happy to accept that and to withdraw that from the list of wards. I was merely going on the report that went to the executive, which didn't refer to that. So I don't know what sites they put forward. I don't know what happened to that email, but that was what I was going on. The sites which were put forward were, I'm aware, put forward by a councillor in Frimley Green who contacted me separately about that. But if councillors have met separately, I'm not sure what happened to their list, but it wasn't in the report. The point I just want to make about this is as follows. It doesn't actually matter what we think. The government have made the position absolutely crystal clear with their expectations. So we can go around and say as much as we like, well, we don't think we've got anywhere. And the government, say, forget the party politics of it, will say, well, that's tough. You need to find it. It's the same way with housing. So, you know, we can cry as much as we like about it and say and talk about all the things we've done. The government are not going to be interested. And I doubt whatever government will be interested either. So we do have to do it, I'm afraid. And I say for those wards, and I'll take out Mitchell and Deep Cut, but the other 5 wards need to do it. I'm sorry. You know, if you haven't done so, please get on with it.
Councillor Chapman, I'll come back to you. I need to give the floor to Councillor Tapper first, because you're on Zoom today. So, yes. Can I also make, I mean, this is exactly the reason why I was reiterating the point. I'm going to take a flyer, or you got to get past this point where we can actually put it forward and hope it doesn't, without hoping, we've got to be sure it won't fail. That's the exact point I was making all the way through. And also, today I'm going to request as a chair, other wards which has not presented any of the sites they have, or if they don't have it, please write in and say you don't have any sites in your wards, because that's why it comes off that list. It's absolutely essential you do that. So Mr. Chinea and Councillor Page are aware that you have replied, I mean, Councillor Bates makes a valid point, saying that he hasn't seen any emails. I mean, I know from the Green did, and eventually Councillor Betton came back to Councillor Bates to actually take it off the list. So it's important that we actually communicate with Councillor Page and Mr. Chinea with those sites. Councillor Tapper, try and don't make it a long statement, just want it short, please.
No, that's fine, Chair. Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to report that the Heatherside situation was reported back. I did email. I had a long discussion with John and Christian on the subject with regard to our ward, and I replied officially on behalf of all of the councillors representing Heatherside to say that we were unable to identify any piece of land on Heatherside that could even be put forward for housing development, let alone for gypsy and traveller needs. The only viable space owned by the council is places like Heatherside Rec, and to suggest that the local football teams would be willing to give up, for instance, one of their football pitches is ridiculous in the extreme. Apart from the fact that the council would lose all the fees that they earn from the teams that play there. So with all the best will in the world, the last opportunity to provide anything like that was with the redevelopment of the Ridgewood Centre. I believe it was proposed that one or two pitches be included in the redevelopment of the Ridgewood Centre. It was before I became a councillor, so I was not involved in that decision. But eventually it was decided to let Linden Homes build entirely on that pitch. And that was the last piece of developable land in Heatherside. So no, there is no possibility on Heatherside.
Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. It's already 8:45. I know Councillor Wheeler needs to come first. Then, if you don't mind, Councillor Galliford, Councillor Chapman has been also making a statement. If your statement is very, very short, yeah, I'll let you come in. Is it a short one, Councillor Galliford? Thank you.
So the question arose at Windlesham Parish Council to ask how many brownfield sites have been looked at, or indeed former retail sites.
It's all part of the officer's job of work, really. So I'm sure that information is buried somewhere within the department. Gavin, can you help me out with an answer?
Councillor Galliford, there are a number of sites which have been assessed. I can't reel them off on the top of my head. We do have a detailed gypsy traveller. I can't remember what the travelling show people assessment sites, which basically lists all the sites which we've looked at, discounted, we've allowed, haven't allowed, looked at all the designations, the different sort of issues going on those sites. So that will list all the document and all the sites in the borough. So coming back to Councillor Page's comment earlier, we've basically assessed all the sites which have come forward. We've assessed sites which are undeliverable, and we've basically gone every inch of the borough to actually look at the sites. So looking at brownfield sites, retail sites, we've looked at them all, but they're not deliverable at the moment. Sorry.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chinea. I'm actually going to go to Councillor Wheeler first because she's been very patient.
I have. So my first question relates to affordable housing completions. We are 38% behind target, and I just wondered how quickly we felt that we would be able to reach the affordable housing completion target, where it would be. I'm not expecting that answer now, but if we can have a response back to this committee. There was agreement some time ago that we would employ and keep employed and have somebody that went out to look proactively at compliance with plans and not just rely on residents reporting a lack of compliance against the plans that had been approved. My understanding was that that officer had been recruited but had been temporarily reallocated to other tasks. I just wondered when, again, I'm happy for this to come back, when we feel that we will be able to have that person in that possession and performing that role that was agreed some time ago was essential. Going on to flooding, as Councillor Page alluded to, residents in Chobham used to be known as the Chobham Web Footers because the ground is very, very low lying. I'm slightly disappointed that within this report it says that work will be starting in Castle Grove Road in summer 2021. We're either really late with doing it or it's a typing error, but either way, could we have an update, please, on that work, which either should have been completed fairly recently, because we're definitely not in summer anymore, or should have been completed last year. I also look at the drainage work in Broadford Lane that is mentioned, and I wondered what actions the council is able to take in relation to drainage and the repeated flooding from the waste site that is at the bottom of Broadford Lane, which has had foul waste and been reported for foul waste being dispersed into the Bourne and across neighbouring land to it. So could I please have an update on what we can do and what we are doing to make sure that that ceases? Going on to the River Bourne, it has been reported over at least 3 years, to my knowledge, the presence of Himalayan balsam, which is, as all of us know, an invasive species which should be dealt with. Such is the lack of action that has been taken between the Environment Agency and Surrey Heath Borough Council forcing or persuading or working with the Environment Agency, I'm trying to get my wording right here, for which I apologise, that almost every single piece of land now, at some point along the Bourne, has Himalayan balsam. And that is increasing year on year. Again, I had the pleasure of walking around the borough with Mr. Chinia a little while ago, and it was evidenced throughout Broadford Lane, the Bourne where it crosses the High Street, Lovelands Lane, basically every piece of land that we could see from the walk that we did, that we had easy access to, that Himalayan balsam is present. As I said, it's been repeatedly reported. Could I please have an update on what we're doing about it and the next steps on it? And then in terms of enforcement, it was brought to my attention just last week, maybe even the beginning of this week, that we had reported Japanese knotweed on site as an enforcement matter, and that no action had been taken on that. That initial report came to the council in May. So although I appreciate that we have got considerable difficulties with staffing, something as important as that, I am very disappointed that it's not been given the priority and hasn't been investigated in the way in which it should have been. Having said that, I have nothing but praise for our enforcement officers, and when they go out and do an incredibly difficult job, including dealing with traveller incursions and the officers that were at the Gypsy and traveller consultation. I do take a little bit of offence at the comments that Councillor Page made. I actually don't think the neighbours to the site were that bad, given the level of passion, and given the level of passion that I have observed in other areas where a Gypsy and traveller consultation has moved forward. Most of the arguments were reasoned arguments that were based on experience that they had, and the particular site in question that I thought brought about a fairly negative response from residents was the Bonds Lanes, the extension in Pennypot Lane of that site. And actually, interestingly enough, there were objections to that extension, not just from the neighbours in houses, but also the neighbours in the Show People site who hadn't, prior to that event, been consulted and raised a number of issues at that consultation meeting. What worries me slightly is that as a borough, we gave very little opportunity for people to respond to that consultation other than electronically. And I have fed these comments back formally via my response in the consultation and privately in meetings. So there was a leaflet that was distributed that gave a telephone number. When a resident rang, they were told by the person that answered that telephone number, which relates back to my earlier question about training and who has and hasn't been trained, that they weren't equipped to take comments by phone. And yet the leaflet very clearly said that we could call in. The residents in the area that are most likely to be impacted by these sites are, as we know from our demographics, predominantly in the more mature stage of life. They are moving probably from autumn to winter. And a number of them, and a number of those that came to the consultation, didn't have the facility to respond online. There was no address given on the leaflet that they could write to. And I have to say, if those sites continue to be considered and go to appeal, it is certainly something that I will be raising with the inspector, that actually a large proportion of our residents were excluded from responding to that consultation. As it is, I understand over 100 people were able to respond online. I also notice in here, and again, unless it's information that is new this evening and something that hasn't come up before, that one of the flood alleviation works hasn't happened in Philport Lane regarding a potential G&T, so Gypsy and Traveller and flood alleviation use. I'm not aware of a Gypsy and Traveller site that is legally planned in Philport Lane, so I'm slightly surprised by that. But I notice there's no such clarification on point 1.41 in relation to Broadford Lane. And as I said, I would be grateful if we could have a response back on the foul, I don't know, what's the term? Can't really call leakage, it's just almost too graphic, isn't it? Foul oozing, I don't know how you describe it. From
more graphic.
But the effluence that comes out of that site and the dispersal into the watercourse that the organisation has, I believe, been charged for. So I am confused by 1.41 and 1.42. So there's a lot there to come back on, for which actually I make no apologies whatsoever. There was one point that was raised by other councillors, which I won't, therefore I don't have to mention, which is marvellous, so thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wheeler. You raised some valid points, which I'm sure the officer or Councillor Page will not be able to answer today, but as you had already agreed that you would have some of them in writing, is it okay?
Could we come back on the 1.41 and the 1.417?
Sure, yeah.
So the Philport Lane, Gypsy and Traveller site versus the Broadford Lane, is it? And also the summer 21 for the Castle Grove Road flood alleviation, please.
Would we handle this today? Now, please?
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave this for Gavin to answer, bless him. I think that is a typo on 21-22 on Castle Grove Road. Perhaps you could...
Either way, Councillor Page, it should have either happened or the document's wrong.
Yeah. We've also conversed, you and I, on the consultation. Thank you for reminding us again of your issues. But
Chair, is it? I mean, I know it's quite a long list on here, but I've got some answers to some of the other questions because I would prefer to answer some of the questions if possible. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's going to be online, isn't it? So yeah, that's fine. So I think the first point you raised was about affordable housing targets, viability targets. I know, and I appreciate from the report we are under the provision in terms of affordable housing. As you know, all major developments come to planning committee for consideration by members. But prior to applications going to planning committee, there's a viability stage which is submitted as part of the planning process, and that's independently assessed as part of any planning application. We do push developers really hard. As you know, a prime example like Sturt Road, for example, we've got 9.3% on that site, and it was below 35%. We push them quite hard, and we do try to push them as hard as we can. Unfortunately, we are to a certain extent hemmed in by other factors, like prior approval applications, where we don't get any affordable housing, and that's outlined in the reports. And also smaller housing sites where there's no policy requirement to provide any affordable housing. I'm currently assessing current viability work with officers at the moment on a smaller scheme, and unfortunately we are pushing the actual viability position quite hard, but given other factors, bill costs going up, interest rates, as we know, are going to go up as well. There's significant labour shortages, there's significant costs to materials as well, and unfortunately that's going to have a massive impact in terms of delivery of affordable housing as well going forwards. And also that has to be taken into consideration. So, answer to your question, we are pushing developers hard, but we need to take on board these outside factors when trying to bring forward affordable housing on these sites. The second point was about your compliance officer. I understand, yes, we did employ a compliance officer back in, I believe it was 2021. We had a compliance officer. And as you know, and it's outlined within the report itself, there has been a shortage of enforcement officers. The enforcement officers have been double handling in terms of work, dealing with enforcement notices, dealing with other work. I think as soon as that team is fully staffed, we will basically look to go back to having a compliance officer to actually have a look at all these compliance issues which are occurring. I know you're saying that it's not fair for residents to actually relay information back, but once we're fully staffed, that is our sort of proposal to actually bring forward the compliance officer to deal with that work itself. So other issues, temporary, so flooding issues in Castle Grove and drainage works, and your issue about the flood alleviation in Philpot as well, I will have to take that offline with Wayne Purdon and give you a written response on that. I've taken notes of that. Unfortunately, I won't be able to give you a response today. I'm not aware of a G&T site, as you have outlined there in there, so I'll have to take that away as well. I know when we walked around Chobham back in, I think it was August time, I think we walked back, a lot warmer than it is today, yeah. And you did outline the issue with balsam in the area, and that's something I need to take offline and to investigate further. Was there anything else at all?
If I could just come back in. In terms of the compliance officer, it's more a question of mark in the sand, not to forget it, not to lose it, because it is something that was agreed that we needed, yeah. Which is why I'm bringing it up. The other matter was the Japanese knotweed, and the fact that had been left until May, has been reported since May, and no action has been taken on that landowner yet. It's a further complication with that particular landowner at the moment because they're allowing an unlawful caravan site, depending on how you interpret that particular piece of legislation. But it's the same landowner.
Yes, I am in consultation with the corporate enforcement team about that, and I'll take it offline and speak to Julia Greenfield about that.
Thank you very much. Now I need to go to Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chapman, is there a question or a statement?
It's a statement.
Can you kindly keep it short, please? Thank you.
I will. Yes, thank you. It's in response to Councillor Bates and St Paul's Ward. We did, in fact, look at St Paul's Ward. and it is highly residential. We could not see any sites on our ward, Chairman, and I will put that in writing if so needed. When the consultation came out from the local committee there, land south of Seymour Drive, Wellington Park, was put forward, but dismissed with very good reasons, including the beautiful recreation areas on both sides of Wellington Park entrance. When planning permission was given, when that development was built very many years ago, I was on planning, and I seem to remember and understand that there are two underground balancing ponds on both sides of Wellington Park at that entrance, which was identified to be looked at. And the planning committee agreed with the recommendation, which was agreed, that went through for Wellington Park, that because of the balancing ponds underneath of that it should never be developed on in any time in the future. And I just wonder, I don't know if this was actually looked at before that went out for consultation for Gypsy site. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Page or Mr. Chinner.
Kind of repeats the other response that I gave earlier, that, you know, our officers have looked at all these things. There is probably some paperwork. I'm hoping there is for this particular recreation ground, but I think if it's a suitable urban drainage scheme for that development, then it would be discounted.
Thank you very much. One more question from Councillor Wheeler.
I will just come back and say that I don't understand why a residential area should preclude a gypsy and traveller site, and to make that point fairly clearly. I'm sure that Councillor Chapman will be delighted to know that actually in my response I have suggested an area in her particular ward.
Yeah.
So I am sure that the officers will look at that in due course. And the residents that responded, I think, had come up with a number of areas which I don't think, because they were SANGs, but there's quite a long list that came back in my response across a number of wards. So hopefully they will be looked at in due course.
Well, thank you very much. I think you make a valid point. There must be sites. I'm sure Mr. Chinner and Councillor Page will look into those.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, there's a long list given to us, and our team are looking into that list. As Councillor Wheeler said, a lot of sites are in the SPA or in areas where we can't develop as well, but there are some sites we're looking at as well. Okay.
Could I suggest something? I mean, just to sort of bring the whole thing in a full circle, is to actually reply back to the councillors and give the reason as to why it can't be included in travellers and gypsy sites. So that way it's out of the picture. It doesn't come back again to you guys and to this committee, because what we are doing is we end up going in circles. Yeah, thank you. All right, you're absolutely right. We need a full report on this. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you.
So this is just the standard work programme setting out what we have got coming up as standing items. I appreciate there's the public realm task and finish group that needs to come back very soon. There is also an issue with the January meeting. We've been asked if it could possibly be rescheduled from the 18th of January to the 25th of January, so it better fits in with the budget setting process going through executive council, that kind of thing. And if I could have agreement on that, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I have quite an unusual request, if I may. There is an issue at the moment in respect of dog waste bins and litter bins not getting emptied in a timely manner. And I was, first of all, can I just say that is absolutely no criticism of Nick, who has been absolutely brilliant, I have to say, in responding to all my queries. in respect of this. And I do know as well that it's probably a national issue, actually. It's not just confined to here. In fact, wherever I cycle around the county, I see the same problem, to be honest. Nonetheless, it is a problem. We pay contractors to empty litter bins and dog bins, and I don't believe there is proper oversight of that contract. Therefore, I would respectfully request, because I believe it's in the community interest to get this issue resolved as quickly as possible, that we move forward, because I think, if I remember right, I haven't got it open right now, but I think I remember right, there's a community services, the one after next, I think is when it would probably be discussed. And I was wondering if we could just bring it as a special item to the next committee meeting. It's for the next one, is it? Yeah. You sure? Oh, right. Is that right?
Yeah, there's one in November.
Yeah, that's what I'd read. Yeah, so it is. You're right. It is in January, but I'd like it brought forward to November.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I fully agree with this, with the dog waste. Even this morning, I had a picture of a big bin in my inbox. So, I mean, that's been dealt with. Thank you very much, Mrs. Stevens, for dealing with that promptly. Appreciate it. Right.
Well, that was a proposal, Chairman, and I don't, yes. and I'm happy to take a seconder. But if we could, Councillor Black seconding, and if we could have a vote on that, bring it forward to January, that would be lovely.
All right. I don't think we need. I'm sure Mr. Stevens is fully aware of dog waste more than anyone else in this room. He not only gets it from one ward, he gets it from all the wards. No. Thank you.
Hang on. So we're not bringing it to January's meeting then?
We are.
We are?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
January.
I mean, November's, beg your pardon. I want it brought to November's meeting.
Oh, beg your pardon. You want it so can you do that? Let's have a look at it.
Sorry, can I just confirm, do you want the entire portfolio brought forward, or just the dog waste? Just, okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Once, can I ask Mr. Stevens for his comments, because he...
Just some clarity, if I may, Chair. We have two main contractors that deal with waste bins throughout the borough. One that is within our Leisure and Recreational Services Department, and the other one is managed by JWS as part of our joint waste contract. Are we asking for a report that encompasses both? Yes. And also has regard of other third-party bins and providers?
Yeah, but whatever we control are the ones we need to look at. If, for example, I know in the Old Dean, Barossa Park, or that particular bin, I believe, is controlled by the military, if my memory is right, or that's what I read somewhere. Maybe the ward council.
I'm not going to get too technical, but
And may I also ask, is the report relating directly just to dog poo, or are we talking about bins in general?
No, this only the dog poo, because we won't have enough space at the...
Dog and litter bins, please, Chairman.
Well, it's...
Are under our control.
Yes, I totally agree. It's just a matter of time at the meeting. That's all I'm trying. Because performance scrutiny meetings tend to drag on. Not drag on, for the right reasons. These are long meetings. So I just want, I'm trying to help the democratic services to try and manage this as best as we can during a meeting. I hear you. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And are we happy to move the January meeting to the 25th?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Right.
Chair, if I might, just remind everybody that 25th of January is Burns Night.
And? All right. I mean, you may have the drink later on. But having said all this, any other points? If not, I'm going to close the meeting. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the councillors and for the officers and for the committee members to make this a little bit more interesting than usual. Thank you so much.